It's confirmed. So we have a massive new release update to go over today following a huge report revealing the future of one player in particular that changes the outlook of the way this team looks going forward. We're going to break that down and discuss what implications it has on Brad Treliving's trade plans and free agency plans going forward. A ton to go over today, folks. Before we get to it all, you guys have been absolutely fantastic with the support. If you're part of the 71% who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Leafs content, daily videos, multiple videos a day, and of course, tons of news coming out for you all. So make sure to hit that subscribe button. Streams as well every single Tuesday. Darius, a lot to go over today, and we're going to be talking about a player who is his future is very murky in Toronto, and Brad Treliving recently came out and confirmed his future on Kipper and Burns. Sure sounds like he's planning on running Nicholas Waugh and Lawton as the bottom six, or the two bottom six centers. And we're going to dive into the full transcription. Basically came out on their show and gave some insight that no one's really talking about here. You can see this here. Brad straight up confirming that David Kampf is a goner. Let's dive right into the actual article slash, I guess this is a transcription, but of course he was on Nick Kiprios' show here. When you look at our roster now, you have Nick Waugh, who can take a lot of defensive heavy lifting with defensive zone starts, defensive faceoffs, and matchups. When you put those two into a pot, it allows you to not necessarily get lost on your 1-2-3, but spread out matchups and situational play that could also free up different people when we talk about Austin, John Tavares, and Scotty Lawton. No mention of David Kampf, no mention of Calle Jarnkrok, and most importantly, talking about running Nicholas Waugh and Scott Lawton as the two bottom six centers. So this one is very intriguing to me. I think it makes things interesting now, and David Kampf seems to not be a part of the Leafs' plans going forward.
So the reason that they weren't mentioned by Brad Treliving is because he's actively trying to trade them to free up that salary cap space, because they both make over $2 million. And I don't think they're part of the plans moving forward. I do think it's interesting that he said, who the centers are going to be. He kind of named them already. It's going to be Scott Lawton, maybe I would imagine fourth line center. And then obviously Nick Waugh as the third line center. And you knew this, that, when we acquired, Nicolas Waugh from the Vegas Golden Knights, Brad Treliving was basically saying when we acquired him, you kind of knew he was going to play center. He's not going to play the wing, right? And we all kind of knew that as well. So that's pretty interesting in and of itself. And I was saying that maybe Scott Lawton can play on his wing on the third line, but then I kind of forgot about Max Domi. And will Max Domi be traded? I don't know. We're going to have other videos on that as well. That is definitely something that I think is up in the air right now, but for right now, he's still on the team, and I don't know if he has a top six spot right now. Obviously, there's going to be another move, but I do think it's interesting that they weren't named. They're clearly trying to trade them both right now. If they trade them both, that frees up a ton of cap space. You would have almost $10 million in cap space. And if you were to somehow get rid of the contract of Ryan Reeves as well, because clearly he's not going to play in the NHL anymore, then you free up even more cap space. So we have some insights, interesting, from Brad Treliving on, who's going to be playing where, or at least what they envision going into camp. And the fact that, there's more moves coming. They're trying to make some things happen, but they have to free up that cap space first because they only have just over $4 million right now.
Yeah, you can see the second paragraph from look down the middle, and this is from Brad Treliving again. When we look down the middle of our ice right now, it gives us a lot of different options. He was an important player for us to get. It is a player that we have had a lot of interest in for a long time, and we are excited to get him. Again, no comments on specifically, of course, David Kampf, because he would be the center in this situation. We saw him get healthy scratch the majority of the playoff run, especially against Florida. Of course, came in for one game, didn't really do a whole lot, but their centers now are pretty locked in. They re-signed John Tavares. Of course, they have Austin Matthews. Scott Lawton, who is a center in theory, naturally, of course, has been playing the wing a lot more last year. He can also run that fourth line center spot with Lorentz on the left, and then whoever else on the right could end up being Calle Jarnkrok. But at the end of the day, it makes things extremely interesting, and it's a interesting report here regarding the future of David Kampf. Now, David Kampf, the player himself, is not necessarily great. He's obviously good in the PK, he's good in certain ways. But the Leafs currently have Max Domi, David Kampf, Calle Jarnkrok, and Ryan Reeves, making a collective $9.5 million. And they should probably shed some of these guys. Now, Max Domi, they're probably going to keep. He could be used even on the top line. We've seen some success in the past, him alongside Matthews, and of course, Matthew Nyes as well. But Calle Jarnkrok, Ryan Reeves, and David Kampf. Of course, David Kampf is interesting. I'm pretty sure if you bury his salary, it ends up being the same or cheaper than, buying him out and all these different things. They're going to try to offload David Kampf and Calle Jarnkrok. Ryan Reeves, conversation for another day, but again, it's part of it. They could shed a ton of cap space, and as they start to look at other free agency options, and most importantly, trades, they're probably going to need to do that, especially when you look at the team right now, and they do have an interesting amount of cap space, $7 million after day one. Of course, they're hovering around there now. And Brad Treliving has continuously mentioned keeping cap flexibility in order to address a top six forward. They need a top six forward, and I don't think they're concerned about guys like David Kampf anymore, but it makes things interesting there. Even if you put Michael Pizzetta down there. And in this hypothetical line, you could see it has David Camp as the fourth line center. It doesn't seem like that's going to be the case, which leads me to believe they're going to open up salary, make a bigger move, and then move pieces around. And I could see that fourth line, including Scott Laughton in the middle, Steven Lorentz on the right, and of course, Michael Pizzetta on the left.
And like you mentioned, I mean, David Camp is good in certain situations, like the PK, but he didn't play in any playoff games except for one, and they got absolutely shelled in that game, right? I believe it was game 5 against the Florida Panthers. So, they weren't even using him for the majority of the playoffs. So, yes, he's good in certain roles, but clearly he's expendable at this point. And I think if you're Brad Treliving, you got to cut your losses and, trade him away at this point. I know you signed him to that contract extension. He has 2 more years on it at $2.4 million. You just have to cut your losses, trade him, even if you're, selling low on him per se. But when you look at the rest of the lineup, you did mention Max Domi on the top line. I don't hate it. We saw it a couple of years ago. It did work, right? It actually looked pretty good in the playoffs. Of course, there were some injuries and then it got disbanded pretty quickly. But I think Max Domi is the perfect third line winger where he hasn't even really been able to play for the Maple Leafs because he's been playing center, which is not where he should be on this team. So I think it would be a good thing to have him on the wing there, or maybe explore a trade, right? Like, again, he could be included in a trade package for a top 6 winger or maybe a top 6 center. We don't know exactly what the plan is right now, but clearly they're going after top 6, not just potential, but a player that can play in your top 6 and produce there. So I don't know. I think that he's probably better off on the third line there as a winger, but the team is slowly starting to take shape. Again, I still think they need one more player in that top 6. I think Michelli, I don't know what line he's going to be playing on, but I do think the plan is, and I think that he can play in the top 6. And we're going to have a video on Michelli as well and specifics on him. But I feel like, he's going to be in the top 6, but they need one more player there. But the rest of the team is starting to take shape. You got Pizzetta. I don't think he's going to play every game, but he has that motor. He can forecheck. And they're going to add some more players once they free up this salary cap space from Yarncroke, from Camp in the bottom 6 as well. And they did already some work there, or they already did some work, I should say, with re-signing Lorentz for a pretty good value contract. Probably could have made more on the open market as well. So I like what's happening right now, but I feel like some of this stuff is going to linger for a while still.
Yeah, let us know down below what your thoughts are on that. A few other updates here as well. David Pagnotta coming out and actively saying that they're trading Calle Yarncroke, or rather actively trading Calle Yarncroke and David Camp. So it's going to be interesting there. Doesn't make a ton of sense to keep all these guys like who are going to be fringe players. You got Michael Pizzetta on a great deal, which makes it David Camp. Again, Pizzetta and David Camp, I'd still probably rather David Camp in a nutshell, but Camp is making triple. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do, especially with their projected cap space here. But a couple other things to go over today before we do wrap up here. It is day 1 of the Maple Leafs development camp, and it's underway at the Ford Performance Center. Forwards Easton Cowan and Landon Sim won't be on the ice during the 3-day camp due to their long junior seasons, but they'll still take part in all of the on-ice activities. There was some drama happening actually today on the in the development camp, but there's no Easton Cowan, no Landon Sim. Makes some sense here. I still expect Easton Cowan to also maybe even factor into some of this. After, depending on how the preseason goes, we saw it with Fraser Minton a while ago, and we also saw Rhett Parsons and Matthew let the fist fly. Not Austin Matthews, a different Matthew, but very interesting. There's any quick thoughts on this? Again, we're seeing a lot of the prospects. Nothing too notable today, just kind of them skating around, getting the drills done. Tynas Luke Koblar there, the recent pick, 64th overall. And of course, letting the fist fly and some tension actually going through in the Leafs camp. I don't hate it, but it's pretty funny to see.
I like it. This happens a lot more than people realize or is filmed around the league. There's so many stories of this happening in practice, and this is development camp. It's physical. Guys are fighting for spots. They want to make their names known, right? So I kind of like it. Healthy competition. Nobody really got hurt or anything like that. They were chucking some fists around. It was more wrestling than anything else, but obviously, things get physical in these development camps, and I think it's good to have healthy competition like that. So I know a lot of people are going to make a lot out of that. I don't think it's that big of a deal. It happens around the league all the time, multiple times a year. It's just not filmed. So I do kind of like it, healthy competition, and hopefully they can bring some of that. I'm not saying they should fight in training camp, but hopefully they bring that healthy competition, everybody to training camp, and the best players make the team.
Yeah, let us know down below your thoughts on all this. Tons of new updates. We're going to keep you up to date. Season's inching closer and closer slowly, and Brad Treliving has tons of moves to make. So make sure to subscribe button. See you guys later.